Bye, Chris.
Leslie, neither one of us have the background, but it's totally fine.
Tiffanie, I can do the background if you want to. I was thinking really deeply about this. I want to be on brand, but we're connected.
Yeah, we are connected and it's fine. This is awesome. We're going to have a great conversation. So thank you again for being here. I know I've been trying to get you on these panels for like the longest time, and I feel like this one is so fitting. So thank you for taking the time to be here.
Oh, I'm so happy. It's such an important topic.
Yeah, definitely. So for the Brand Innovators audience out there, I wanted to start by saying, or just by talking about your experience, and this might throw you off guard a little bit, but I want to know a little bit more about maybe where you grew up, kind of your experience going through school, and the roles that you've had in getting to where you are today. Just a little story, and then we'll get into some questions that I feel like will help kind of tell the whole framework about you and everything about you.
Tiffanie throwing me those curveballs, but you know, I love it. Let's do it. Let's do it. Let's get this day started. Yeah. So how I grew up, you know, going way back. So where do I start with that question? I grew up in Los Angeles, born in Chicago, Chi-Town, grew up in Los Angeles. And I'd say, you know, my experience was one, I was very blessed. You know, I didn't want for anything, but I'd say that a lot of people who I grew up with actually, you know, wouldn't even know my true reality. You know, my education was really important to my parents. My parents are physicians. I'm going real deep. And, you know, my dad had some health problems growing up, so he didn't work for a while. And so, you know, financially that was tough on our family. So, you know, I feel like I sort of wore two hats sometimes, but again, it wasn't, again, I'm extremely blessed, was happy adult, was a happy child. But what a lot of people don't realize is, you know, I went to a pretty fancy private school that I was grateful to go to, and that was important to my parents, but had the best friends in the world. But two things, you know, Diversity Summit, I grew up often being the only one in the room. So I was the only, I think we used to joke that there were 2.5 Black people in my grade. So me and another woman and someone who was half Black, part Black. And so we would say that we were, you know, 2.5. And for the majority of my childhood, that's how I grew up. And that was my reality. And then what a lot of people didn't realize was that I was also at this fancy private school, but I was on scholarship. So a lot of people would say, oh my God, did you know so-and-so's on scholarship? And I'd kind of be like, I am too. I hope no one knows that. I know I was fine talking about it now, obviously, but it was something I was self-conscious about growing up. So that was my reality. I didn't, you know, thinking about mentorship, I have, you know, great loving parents who were inspirational to me, but I did not want to do what they did. So sort of medical healthcare backgrounds, which is ironic. I realize I'm at GoodRx right now, but I'm in marketing at GoodRx. I still have had 3 babies, and I still need to lay down when I give blood or anything like that, because I just get so woozy at the thought of blood. So, you know, I sort of paved my own path. I found out about a program called the LEAD program when I was in high school, and I was looking for something to do over the summer. And I was just, you know, I think about a lot. I think about this a lot now that I'm a mom, just like what makes some kids kind of self-select some places versus other places. And I'd say, you know, my parents, like even when I was applying to colleges, I just kind of had my own list, and I was like, bam, 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 going through it. When I went to the LEAD program, I just kind of said, Mom, I'm going away for the summer. You know, it's this 4-week program. I'm going to Michigan. And she's like, what are you talking about? But I'd say that's really when I got exposure to business for the first time, and knew what I wanted to do. And, you know, came back from that program really inspired. And I feel like it put me on a really great path, because I came back and I hadn't taken any of the entry tests to like AP Calc or anything like that. And I came back and I said, this is what I want to do, and basically made it my mission to go, you know, get in the classes I needed to get into the colleges I wanted to get. So
love that.
I don't know if that's what you had in mind,
no, I
but
love
that's
that.
my answer.
I love that. And we hadn't talked about this before, just full disclosure to the audience. But when we're thinking about diversity, inclusion, accessibility, it's not just something that we are focusing on in our roles today and in the world we live in today. It's, been a part of us probably our entire lives. And, whatever that might be, it's been a through run. You lived in LA, it's very much so a melting pot of everything. But there were circumstances where it was more, at the forefront and being the only or the few or things like that. So, I asked that to say to go into sort of thinking about mentorship as a whole. I know you mentioned your parents were really awesome mentors to you, or just sort of like figures in your life that gave you positive experiences. But I'm curious to know what mentorship looked like over the course of your career. So maybe even thinking about higher education, going into some of your early roles. And has there been sort of like maybe a through line that serves you well today in the role that you have?
Absolutely. So mentorship is so important to me. I know it's a word that gets thrown around a lot, but I'd say, personally, I've been very blessed to encounter a lot of really amazing people in my life, ranging from colleagues and managers who have motivated me and inspired me, to my mom, who I already mentioned, who's just a badass, and I don't tell her that enough, who, now that I'm a mom, inspires me so much. So
I hope she's watching.
I hope so too. Yeah, this is a good time to tell her. But I call those people, I'd say I have a little bit of a personal board of directors. And I'd say that the funny thing about my board of directors is that I have a lot of people who are on them, and not everybody who's on the board knows that they're on the board. But just like the LEAP program was a program, but had some early, managers really who sort of reached out a hand or reached out a hand and sort of said, like, here's the lay of the land. Like, I hadn't been exposed to this. I started my career in investment banking. When I got to school, everyone was talking about iBanking. I was like, internet banking, yeah. And obviously that's not what iBanking is. And so really was grateful for the people who reached out a hand back and said, like, let me tell you what's going on. Like, here are some of the things that you need to be aware of. And like, this is how you prep for interviews and whatnot. And I think just as those people reached out to me, I try to do the same thing and reach out a hand to, pull people up to and share my experiences to the extent that that's helpful. But I'll say something, I think you said mentorship, but lately I've been thinking a lot more about this idea of sponsorship and really what that means versus mentoring alone. And I'd say, to me, what sponsorship means is it's more of an active role, really. Moving on from just giving, time and advice to being more actively engaged in someone's life, helping to give them a platform, using your platform to showcase or spotlight them, or really actively working to open the door for others. So I think a lot about this truly in my own career, but also, how I can help those on my team and provide a platform for them. I think sponsorship is hard because, I've sometimes asked people to mentor me, and I've had people ask me to be their mentor, but I think sponsorship is something that you can't really ask for. It sort of just happens. So I try to model that.
I love that you use the word sort of like a board of directors and like thinking about sponsorship in this, because it is sort of, it's like your own personal life business. I don't know. I always say, if like the person I'm living with, like, we are co-managers of this place, like we are co-founders, like we are both in charge to make sure that this home is what we want it to be. Right. So to think about that as it relates to, your life experiences, yes, it's related to work, but I'm sure you've gotten advice that is very relevant to you now being a mom and, things like that down the line. So I think that's really awesome to hear. To talk a little bit about maybe like one thing that has been consistent throughout your years, what would you say that, or maybe a couple things that might have been a through line or things that are consistent over the course of your career? What would that look like?
Yeah, I'd say when I think about my career and sort of the story in the through line throughout, I didn't plan it this way. So I will say, big caveat, I think it's hard to plan this in my experience and what I've heard from others. But, with the benefit of looking back, I'd say it's been getting closer and closer to the revenue generating side of the business. And so I'll say, I said I started my career in investment banking, which was a great training ground. It was a great professional experience for me. Couldn't be matched. But while it provided me a great training ground professionally, I yearned not only, it was in the services industry, right? So, and that works, like that's great if that's what you want to do. For me, I was interested in learning about, companies and how they operate and how they make money. And so I thought, all right, how can I get closer to that? And so I took a job in industry, I call it. My first role, I went to Ralph Lauren after Bank of America Securities, and I wanted to be on the ground floor, so to speak. And so finance was my foot in the door there, but what I learned there was, being in FP&A, I got exposure to senior leadership. I got exposure to all other areas of the business. And that's when I really developed my passion for consumer products and thinking about why this person buys this versus that. And I thought, okay, I'm still in a support role, which is great. I was learning. So always looking for something where I'm learning, but thought, how can I get even closer to the revenue generating side of things? And I'll say, that was a great training ground as well. And then, I did a brief stint in business school, some retooling. And then since then, I very much look at my role in marketing now as driving revenue and growing businesses and building businesses. And that's what I do.
Oh, I love that. I mean, I think I've said it not as eloquently as you just put it, but I always feel like I want to get to the money making side. Like I want to be part of, at least I want to have some visibility into it. And if I could like have a stake in it, even better. But it's like, I know that we're kind of going on a tangent a little bit, but I agree with that sentiment. I think that's awesome that you've had such a robust amount of experiences that all mattered in some way. Like you took a piece of everything, and it was not just I'm majored in marketing, I'm going to this and that and the other. It's like, it seems, I think very valuable to folks out there who are experiencing, not a linear path as well.
Yeah, ironically, I went to a business undergrad. So I could have been, we had concentrations. I could have been a marketing concentration, but it's really funny to me now that I am in marketing, because at the time, and this was, going on no information, I was young and naive, but, I thought marketing was soft. I thought, I don't want to do that. I'm going to do finance, and finance and management was my passion, and that was great, all part of my path. Always a learning experience, but I always get a chuckle of how I've turned back, full 180, and also marketing is not soft at all.
I was going to say all the marketers are like in the chat, like that's funny. Okay, so that's your experience. Are there certain things that you look to your experience that you've had and you look for now for candidates that are part of your team or part of, roles that you're hiring for? Would you say that you want them to have similar experiences, or what does that process look like as you, look to recruit?
Yeah, that's a great question. Lots of layers there. So I'd say, generally, and, I know we're talking about diversity and whatnot. When I think of diversity, I think of diversity of all lenses, right? So diversity of experience and everything. So I have to do that quick plug because, depending on the role, two things. I think marketing, what does marketing mean? A lot of people, right? Like VP of marketing, that can mean very different things depending on what industry you're in, what company you're at, et cetera, et cetera. But I'd say, I look for people who complement me in general. But, for anyone out there actually looking for some concrete advice and, how to look for a role, I'd say, they should be communicative, open to asking questions, ready to admit, right? If you're in an interview process, I find this a lot, ready to admit if you don't know something, right? That's okay, but I would own it. And I'd also have an answer of how you will overcome that. But I'd say bring ideas to the table and also offer insight from, your previous experiences. For me, marketing is, very much human-centered. Think of myself as being the voice of the customer, and we're all customers for, whatever. So I'd say share your experience and your ideas and you'll be fine. And then I'd say, of course, sometimes, I used to say that, looking for someone, depending on what the role is that you're looking at. I used to say that I'm looking for someone who's quantitative, and I can teach you the other things, right? Like if you're like in a very acquisition focused job. But I'd say, like I said, marketing is broad and in the type of marketing. And so I think, even the industry and landscape is changing, but you can be taught a lot of things. But I think be your authentic self and always start with what you've done in the past, what you're looking to do in the future, and how you can add value. Why that company?
I love that too. It really goes with, I don't know if you're listening in on the session before us, but there was a comment made about, when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility, it just is as part of a company. When it's good, it just is. It's not forced. It's not just tacked on to what we do. And so to your point, in looking for people to come and be open about their ideas and their experiences, that's part of it. It's not just saying, just do it for the sake of, to say we did it. It's like, we need all of these, now I'm thinking food, recipes, ingredients, like methods to make this pot, successful and taste good at the end of the day. So that was maybe a bad way to put it, but
no, I'm picking up what you're putting down. I think it's great. I think, yeah, I think that's great. I think it's really important to having a variety of ingredients, but a variety of perspectives in the room has always been valuable. And I think, like I already said this, but not just different ethnicities and genders, but also, career verticals, areas, where you come from. We started with my family, home environment, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
I love that.
I view myself as, worldly and inclusive, don't get me wrong, but I also recognize that, I don't know what I don't know. And so having other voices in the room complements my experiences, and it's a great learning experience for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, I love that you added that as well, because it takes conversations like this coming from, senior leadership to have people continue to be open and not so afraid to say stuff. Now, it's not about just, throwing everything to the wind, but I think it's also being open and allowing people to feel comfortable in those environments, included, you know what I mean? Belonging, a sense of belonging is something else that someone said on a previous panel.
I think you're right. And even, we started this and you, I don't know whether I said it or you said it, but this concept of just one, I think for all of the hiring managers out there too, I'd say that, as you're trying to build, diverse teams and whatnot, it's important to not just have just one, right? It's not just checking a box. Because when you're the only one in the room, as I often find myself in various situations in life and growing up, I'm pretty sure there are academic studies around this, but it can be hard to find that voice, right? There's a lot of pressure to go to the mean or go towards the majority. And, a lot of us out there are used to just playing these different roles and, always my authentic self, don't get me wrong, but, when you're the only one in the room, it's sort of like, know the room, know your audience. I can't always be like, as the Black woman, not that I would ever start a sentence like that, but yeah. Something like that. It's hard, but when diversity is really embraced and it's celebrated that you have all these different points of view, I think that's when the magic really, really happens.
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head, and leading into the next question, and thinking about like you as a person of color, as a woman, like, are you inspired to continue to make sure like other women like you who are younger feel as included and have maybe like the access that to different experiences that you've had, or maybe not that you've had, that just they might not have or know that they could have? Like, I think, I think it's so awesome that you're sharing your story. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say that's something that's very important to me, just like I started again, and look, I'm still striving too, right?
Yeah.
Anyone out there who wants to sponsor me, my story is not done either. So, not to make it about me, but I would say that, I think it's important to share my story. I'm an open book, like I say, and, I share the good, I share the not good. And I'm grateful to people who share that with me, because I think, I don't know if I'm inspiring or people should aspire to be like me, but my hope is that by sharing my story, you know, it helps others on their journey. And so using that and using what platform I do have to help, you know, bring others forward is something that is just so important to my core.
I love that. It's like, yes, doing it. I think we saw, if we're thinking about actually some marketing tactics that maybe not tactics that were used, but just people out in the world last year, influencers sharing the mic and things like that, to be able to do that as in like individuals behind the curtain and a part of organizations and community groups and networking, like things like that. That's also important. We want to see it and we want to make sure like it's happening on the back end too. So let's talk a little bit about what success might look like then. If we're maybe not then, but yes, as a marketer, you have your goals, but
yeah,
how has your definition changed throughout the course of your career? Has it evolved in any way?
Yeah, I would say so, you know, again, different layers there. So I'd say that let's see, I'll start with the professional. I think there's a professional answer to that question, and then there's a personal. But I think, you know, these days the professional and personal, right? It's like all intermingled. But I'd say, yeah, you know, I think professionally, when I was earlier in my career, you know, success on its face at least seemed more immediate, right? So you can get used to, you know, you say things like, I did this, I did that, right? I would keep a running list. It was when it was review time, I was ready. I was like, I have my Word document. These are all the projects. This is the impact I had. And so I think that's also advice for anyone. You know, I should probably still keep that to an extent, but I think that one of the things that, you know, as the size of my teams grew, I'd say one of my breakthroughs as a leader was getting used to, and you know, empowering teams is always been something that I think is a superpower of mine and something that I tried to lean into, but really embracing that, you know, while I'm responsible for the strategy and the vision and the success of achieving those goals or achieving those objectives and, you know, getting to that vision depends on empowering those high performing teams. So it's not always like I did this, I did that. It's, you know, how am I working as a team and collaborating and empowering those around me? So I'd say that's been a professional breakthrough for me. And I'd say, you know, personally, I find that I'm the happiest when I have autonomy and I love my job, right? We're all busy. I have 3 kids as an example now, right? But I have 3 kids, but I spend way more time with my coworkers, whether in person or in Zoom, than I do with my family. So quite frankly, life is too short to not love what you're doing. And I'd say for me now, I wouldn't say there's always that clear division between personal and professional. So I say I try to love what I'm doing. So work doesn't always feel like work. And, you know, when I am away from my family and my kids, you know, I feel like I'm, you know, I have meaning and I find meaning in it. And I feel like reflecting that back, right? Like finding meaning in my professional sphere makes me better at home. It makes me, when I'm fulfilled at work, I'm a better mom, I'm a better wife, I'm a better all of these things. So, you know, I generally have a happier and more balanced life.
I love that. I mean, our CEO is probably crying tears of happiness. I think his phrase is make work your leisure. I don't know if that was supposed to be external, but we love it. It's like, it does feel like that. Like, you know, when you love what you do, it doesn't feel like work so much. And that's the goal. I know for myself, and I'm sure a lot of other people out there. I didn't realize we had so much in common, Leslie. I made a deck too in my first jobs. I'm like, this is my success this year. I kind of halted a little bit, but I'm like,
yeah.
I love that. Thank you for validating
that.
Yeah,
it's important, right? Like it's like, you gotta love what you do. You gotta do this. But at the end, you know, when I go in, it's not like, you know, how was your year, Leslie, in review? It's not like, well, I'm really loving life. It's also a bit about,
right. You're like, let me show you.
Yeah, let me show you what I did. So I think that's important too.
Great takeaway. And to speak about more, I know you have you probably have a lot of advice to give, but I want to know if you have like a couple of specific bullet points that you would give to folks looking to that maybe women of color may have their own different backgrounds that they're coming from. Do you have any advice if they want to break into a brand marketing role? or in this industry?
Yeah, I think it's great. I don't know if it's, that's interesting. You can, I don't know if it's unique to, being a, a woman of color, but I'd say just in general, my role is to think about the customer, live and breathe their needs and help them fulfill those needs, right? So I'd say, some advice. So if you're interviewing with a company, and I think I touched on this before, even if you hadn't had the experience in the industry or with brand marketing specifically, I'd start with the product and the consumer, right? Like starts there, ground level. Did you visit the website? Did you sign up for their emails? You'd be surprised, right? Like I'd laugh too, but you'd be surprised how many people I interview. And I say, well, did you sign up for our emails? Oh, not yet. I'm like, what are we even talking about here? You're telling me you're passionate about working on my team, but you haven't visited the website. I think most of the time they visit the website, but like doing things, like at least signing up for emails, but when it makes sense, like, did you test the product best you could, right? Like these are just like basic things that I think that you can, then depending on, right, if you're trying to break into the industry, I think you said, these are great places to start. If you're already in the industry or in the role, like I think, obviously from there you go into getting a little bit more sophisticated on, what sort of ideas that you can bring to the table. But I'd say, think from a consumer perspective, have a point of view on how well or not well the company is fulfilling that, need or desire. And, ask yourself those questions from the consumer point of view, and I think you'll be golden.
Yeah, I mean, sage advice for sure. And I get it. There are circumstances that I've too been in, like you didn't prepare at all, but love it when it's both the opportunity for someone to come in and ask a bunch of questions from an external point of view, but then to also offer some insight. I think that that's awesome because a lot of people may not feel like that's something that is actually heard on the back end. So like you as a hiring manager, they may not understand that that's something that's quite beneficial in some ways. Like you never know what you can learn from someone else's POV.
Yeah, I love to ask people like, what did you think, right? It's not like, it's not, what did you learn in school? What framework? I mean, maybe, what framework are you applying? Maybe for some, some roles you might do that, but a lot of times it's, what'd you think of our funnel? What did you think of, the email we sent you? Did it resonate? Would you buy again?
Yeah.
What are your ideas to make it better?
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so to shift it a little bit to talk about sort of like marketing as a whole and some of the steps that we as marketers and people who are supporting marketers might take to ensure it's continually changing and innovating. What do you think innovation might look like for marketers? Maybe in your opinion, maybe not to jump the gun. I have thoughts too, but let me know.
Then why don't you start? No, I'm joking. I'm joking.
It's all about you.
No, look, I think I got customers on the mind right now. So I think there's a constant theme for me this morning, but I'd say listening to consumers, being open to their input, and what's put in advertising, products, features, et cetera. Like for me, it all starts with knowing your customer. I'd say, okay, with that said, there's a lot of, from a more tactical perspective, also using data in general. I think it's a fragmented data world out there right now. And even with, you keep hearing things like iOS 14 and, all of the changes going on in the industry, I think that, there are some companies out there who are doing some really interesting things to create personalized experiences. And so I think a lot of the innovation that I'm seeing and hearing about is coming from that point of view. How can you create personalized experiences in a very fragmented world? So
Yeah, I mean, this resonates with me so much too. And it's, again, so good to hear it from your point of view, is because I was just talking to a brand that's completely reformulating its product in the next year based on what they've heard from their audiences. So think about the audiences that may not have thought that they had a voice, and such a, different people too, robust community of folks that are now leading to change in this entire brand's like framework in the next couple of weeks, because of what they've said. So that's data, that's listening to your audience. I think that brands are getting smarter. I think last year again was very telling when someone said that they felt a certain way about the brand. They immediately were pivoting in a lot of ways, or adjusting, I should say, what they're doing. But I mean, it can't be said more often. You have to listen to them, because how do you get better?
Yeah, totally. And I think also, your customers are diverse too, right?
Not just
different people have different needs, and how can you speak to them? I think that's like the lean into personalization. You can have, there are certainly some messages that are universal and can go across to everybody, but think a lot about targeting, customer segmentation. How do you speak in a more personalized way to people? I think is really, really important.
That's perfect. Okay, I'm gonna jump into some audience cues that are coming in. Let's see. Okay, how about this? What do you do to decompress after maybe a long week or a long day? I know folks are just dying to go on vacation now, but
oh my gosh, yes, so many things. I'm like, keep giving me ideas. I don't know. No, I'd say again, lots of, okay, what do I do to decompress? I think there's a lot of different ways that I could answer that. I think, as I've gotten, let's say, more tenured in life, have some different circumstances going on. I say some of that is sort of forced, right? Because, where our office is open and I'm here, and, you spend a lot of time. So I think, at the end of the day, one of the silver linings of, the past 2 years has been that greater appreciation for family time for me. And so just, right, like when you're working from home I used to miss bedtime all the time. When you're working from home, it's really hard to look at a 4-year-old and be on your screen. I think that like there's a whole generation of people who are going to think that work hard is just like literally staring at a screen like this. But those forced times, and like embracing it, like embracing that time. I'd say for any parents out there, something that I always try to do is like self-care. And whatever self-care means to you, it could be a yoga class, it could be, I don't know, drinks with friends, it could be a massage, whatever it is. But that's one thing that I tend to be sort of unforgiving. Not that I get to do it a lot, but I'm sort of unapologetic about just, taking that time, because again, I just know that it makes me a better human. And when I'm a better human, I'm a better marketer, I'm a better mom, I'm all that good stuff. So I'd say, taking or a hike or something like that, wherever you can find that time to do something that makes you feel you, just making sure that you leverage that, and you do what you need to do to be present. Oh, and travel. That was the other thing. I used to love travel. Early on, speaking of mentors, early on in my career, thinking back to my investment banking days, worked so hard, don't get me wrong, slept under my desk, like did the thing. But I remember very vividly one of my managers, like it was kind of cool. Like if you didn't get a lot of time off, but I was doing long distance with my now husband, but then boyfriend. And I was going to go visit him, I think in Hong Kong or something. And, we had a big deal come up, and I was like, oh, should I cancel my trip? Because that's something that everybody said or offered. So I was like, oh crap, I should offer to cancel my trip. And I remember someone who was super smart, like the best in the group. He was, my associate, and he said, don't ever do that. Don't offer, like this time is so important. And that's all I needed to hear. And I've continued it on. I think, we all work really hard when we're working, and having those times away and trying to embrace that is something that's really important to me.
Oh, good answer. I love that. let's see. Okay, how about what's something that you're looking forward to this year? It could be professionally or personally, but what are you looking forward to? I mean, yeah, I always want to jump the gun and like join in on the conversation, but this is about you. I was gonna say
Yeah.
I'm excited always to see, what brands are doing in the marketing space and how things are changing, of course. But again, I think is not just since, but the theme is diversity and inclusion. And so I'm excited to see the risks that brands take and in, maybe developing a new framework for how they operate, how they hire, how they recruit, how they present themselves to customers. There's so much there, but I'm curious to know, what are you looking forward to?
You know what, not to, in the interest of time, not to just say what you said, but sort of, and I mean that really genuinely. I think I already answered it on the personal note. I like when things are like fully opened and whatnot, it's just like I will be hitting the road, and want to go visit my brother, like he's in London, but I'd say like looking back of, we talked about data already, but thinking about really brands and how brands have changed. I think like seeing how they've evolved over the last 2 years, or whatever, like in general, but over the last 2 years, especially with some of the social unrest and things that have been brought to the forefront. I think brands can no longer sit on the sidelines. And I've even, I've been in positions where it's like, you don't want to, right? Like you have a really strong brand, but almost really truly in the interest of protecting that, right? Like I was working with someone once and they're like, well, we can't take a side. We can't take a side on this or that. Like, not, we don't want to post for this holiday because then you have to post for all the holidays. And what if we alienate someone on this political side of the spectrum? And not that every brand or company should just dive headfirst into this, but it's been really interesting to see brands evolve as you just realize that you can no longer stay on the sidelines, right? Like, when George Floyd happened, I remember we were running social media, and I think a lot of marketers were having this moment where you're like, okay, what do we say? What is our, what do you do, as a company here? And I can tell you not saying something was definitely not an option, because even in the, amount of time that it took to like put together like some words or post or something, we had people messaging us, like, why haven't you said anything? Why haven't you commented? And it became very clear that consumers were not going to let brands just sit on the sidelines and wait things out. They wanted to know your point of view.
Yeah. 100%. I mean, it's all the more, I want to say, hopeful, and it gives me some optimism in the world that it's finally something that's like acceptable and low-key an issue if there isn't anything said about certain things that are happening in our world. It's America. We live in such a like diverse world right now, and it's only going to become more of that. And it's not just about ethnicities, it's literally everything. So
everything,
like, how do we have some of those conversations and make them not taboo anymore? So I mean, I'm excited to see what Thanksgiving is even going to look like, with bringing different people to the table and having those conversations pretty openly. So Leslie, there's so much we can talk about. I was like, you gave a lot of insight. I feel honored to have to talk to you today, because not only that you're a woman of color, but you have such a unique career trajectory that you've had and that you're going to continue to have, I know. So just thank you for being part of this. Appreciate you.
Really appreciate you. It's been fun. Thanks for having me.